This is no longer a hypothetical crisis. This is no longer rhetorical escalation. According to multiple intelligence assessments and public statements, the Middle East is now facing one of its most dangerous moments in decades, driven by a fundamental shift in Iranian military doctrine and a rapidly narrowing margin for error between Tehran, Washington, and Tel Aviv. Iran's military and political leadership is no longer framing conflict in defensive terms. During a live state broadcast parliamentary session, Iran's Speaker of Parliament issued a warning that senior Western defense analysts now describe as unprecedented in its clarity and intent. According to official transcripts and regional media reports, Iran openly declared that it does not consider itself bound to wait for an attack before striking. Instead, it claims the right to launch preemptive military action based solely on what it interprets as signs of an impending threat. That statement alone marks a dramatic departure from decades of Iranian strategic messaging. Traditionally, Tehran justified military actions as retaliation. Now, according to legal analysts familiar with international conflict doctrines, Iran is signaling a willingness to initiate hostilities without a triggering strike. That is not deterrence. That is a declaration of conditional first-use force. According to reports, the warning was explicit. Iranian officials stated that in the event of any attack on Iran, every American military installation, base, and naval asset across the Middle East would be considered legitimate targets, alongside Israel itself. This was not delivered in a closed diplomatic channel. It was delivered publicly, on live television, with lawmakers chanting anti-American slogans designed to communicate resolve both domestically and internationally. Defense analysts note that this public posture matters. It locks Iran into a narrative that becomes difficult to walk back without appearing weak, particularly at a moment when the regime is facing its most severe internal unrest in decades. According to multiple human rights organizations, ongoing protests inside Iran have resulted in hundreds of confirmed deaths, with the actual number likely far higher due to a nationwide communications blackout. Court-adjacent monitoring groups report that security forces have used lethal force against demonstrators across major cities as economic collapse and political dissent converge into a full-scale legitimacy crisis for the regime. Economic data cited by international financial observers shows Iran's currency has collapsed to historic lows, erasing purchasing power and triggering widespread unrest. What began as protests over economic hardship has evolved into direct challenges to Iran's clerical leadership, with chants explicitly targeting the supreme leader. For regime survival, this creates a dangerous incentive structure. Political science research consistently shows that embattled regimes facing internal collapse often externalize crises to rally nationalist support. According to regional security experts, this is the context in which Iran's new military posture must be understood. Iran is not issuing threats from a position of confidence. It is issuing threats from a position of perceived encirclement. The June 2025 conflict with Israel, which drew in U.S. forces, significantly degraded Iran's air defense network and struck key nuclear-related infrastructure. Satellite imagery and defense briefings from that period confirm substantial losses. Russia and China, Iran's nominal strategic partners, have provided minimal material or diplomatic backing during the current crisis, leaving Tehran largely isolated. Yet vulnerability does not equate to restraint. According to military strategists, vulnerability often produces risk-seeking behavior. Iran has already demonstrated that it is willing to strike American assets directly. During the June 2025 conflict, Iranian missiles targeted Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, the largest U.S. military installation in the Middle East, housing roughly 10,000 American personnel. According to statements from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the base was described as a central strategic asset of U.S. operations in the region. Satellite analysis published by commercial imagery firms showed that the base had been partially evacuated prior to impact, following advance warnings reportedly sent by Iran to both Qatar and the United States. Missile defense systems intercepted most incoming projectiles, but damage assessments suggest at least one missile may have struck infrastructure within the base perimeter. Defense analysts emphasize that the warning does not mitigate the significance of the attack. On the contrary, it demonstrates escalation management. Iran showed that it could hit high-value American targets while controlling casualty levels to avoid triggering overwhelming retaliation. That calculated restraint, however, was a strategic choice, not a limitation. According to U.S. intelligence briefings cited by major American newspapers, that restraint may no longer be guaranteed. President Trump has repeatedly stated that the United States would consider military intervention if Iranian security forces continue killing protesters. According to reporting from multiple outlets, the president has been briefed on a range of strike options, including operations extending beyond purely military targets. Legal experts note that such briefings indicate planning maturity, not symbolic posturing. Iran's response to these signals has been swift and explicit. In interviews with regional media, Iran's foreign minister stated that Iran now possesses broader and more extensive military preparedness than it did prior to the June 2025 conflict. According to defense analysts, this claim suggests efforts to rebuild missile stockpiles, disperse launch platforms, and enhance asymmetric capabilities designed to offset conventional inferiority. Israeli intelligence assessments, cited by regional security correspondents, report Iranian missile exercises and movements that could serve as either defensive preparations or cover for imminent offensive action. Israeli military leadership reportedly communicated these concerns directly to U.S. Central Command, warning that the indicators resemble pre-attack posturing observed in previous regional conflicts. This is where the escalation loop becomes dangerous. According to conflict escalation models studied by military academies, wars are often triggered not by deliberate intent, but by mirrored threat perception. One side prepares defensively, the other interprets those preparations as offensive. Each response reinforces the other's fear, accelerating towards conflict without a clear decision point. That dynamic is now visible across the region. American forces raise readiness levels in response to Iranian warning. Iranian commanders interpret those movements as indicators of imminent strikes. Israeli intelligence flags Iranian dispersals as attack preparation. Gulf states observe all sides mobilizing and fear becoming collateral damage. According to Reuters and other outlets, U.S. personnel were advised to evacuate portions of Al Udeid Air Base in mid-January as contingency planning intensified. The timing is critical. The evacuation comes only months after Iran demonstrated it could strike that exact location. Military planners understand symbolism. From Tehran's perspective, evacuations confirm vulnerability. From Washington's perspective, they confirm risk. From Israel's perspective, they confirm instability. And the battlefield is not confined to a single country. According to Iranian statements, every American base across Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, and surrounding waters would be considered targets in a conflict. Naval assets operating in the Persian Gulf would be exposed. According to defense analysts, Iran's doctrine emphasizes distributed targeting, forcing adversaries to defend multiple sites simultaneously, stretching missile defenses and decision-making capacity. Beyond direct strikes, Iran retains leverage that does not require battlefield superiority. According to energy security experts, even limited disruption in the Strait of Hormuz would send shockwaves through global markets. European policy institutes warn that sustained conflict could disrupt energy flows, spike oil prices, and destabilize already fragile supply chains. Iran's military doctrine has long prioritized asymmetric warfare. Rather than confronting American strengths directly, it focuses on exploiting vulnerabilities, maritime choke points, proxy networks, low-cost saturation attacks using drones and missiles, and political pressure through regional destabilization. Statements from Iranian officials suggest confidence in this approach. Whether that confidence is justified remains unclear, but perception alone can drive action. Behind the scenes, Gulf Arab states are scrambling to prevent catastrophe. According to diplomatic reporting, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Oman initiated urgent efforts to persuade Washington to delay or abandon military action. A senior regional official described a frantic, sleepless night of diplomacy aimed at preventing what they fear could become an uncontrollable regional explosion. Their fear is rational. A U.S.-Iran war would not remain bilateral. It would engulf the region, force alliances, destabilize economies, and potentially redraw security arrangements that have held uneasily for decades. According to international relations scholars, the most dangerous phase of any crisis is not peak confrontation, but the moment when all sides believe the other is about to act. That is the phase the Middle East is now entering. Iran has declared a willingness to strike first. The United States is actively weighing military options. Israeli intelligence is on high alert. Gulf states are racing against time. Internal unrest inside Iran is escalating. The pause created by diplomacy is fragile. The underlying drivers remain unresolved. And every signal being sent, military, political, and rhetorical, reduces the space for error. This is not a distant scenario. According to analysts across Washington, Tel Aviv, and the Gulf, this is an immediate crisis where a single misinterpretation could trigger a regional war with global consequences. And the most dangerous part is still ahead. What happens next will not be decided by speeches or slogans. It will be decided by timelines, force posture, and how commanders interpret signals in an environment where trust no longer exists. According to senior defense analysts, the most dangerous element of the current standoff is not Iran's rhetoric, but the authorization logic behind it. When Iranian officials publicly state that commanders may act on objective signs of a threat, they are lowering the threshold for military action to the level of perception. In military planning, perception is volatile. Radar activity, aircraft repositioning, naval maneuvers, or intelligence leaks can all be interpreted as precursors to attack. History shows that wars often begin not because one side intended to start them, but because both sides believed the other was about to. Court records, declassified studies, and post-war analyses from conflicts ranging from World War I to the Gulf War confirm this pattern. Preemptive doctrines compress decision time. They reward speed over certainty, and they create incentives for first movers to strike before the window closes. According to reports from U.S. defense officials, this is precisely what concerns American planners. Iran's command and control structure allows for decentralized execution once strategic authorization is given. That means local commanders, operating under pressure and incomplete information, could initiate missile launches without direct political oversight if they believe an attack is imminent. From Washington's perspective, that dramatically raises the probability of accidental war. Israeli security officials share that concern. According to Israeli military analysts, Iran's missile forces are now structured for rapid launch from dispersed locations, including mobile platforms and hardened underground facilities. This reduces warning time. It also complicates preemptive neutralization. Even a successful first strike by the United States or Israel would not eliminate Iran's retaliatory capability. That reality undercuts the idea of clean, limited military action. And retaliation would not be symbolic. According to Pentagon wargaming scenarios cited in policy journals, Iran's likely opening move in a full-scale conflict would involve simultaneous missile and drone strikes against multiple American bases, combined with cyber operations and proxy attacks. The objective would not be battlefield victory, but shock, disruption, and political pressure. By creating multiple crises at once, Iran would seek to overwhelm defensive systems and force Washington into rapid escalation decisions. Energy infrastructure would be at risk almost immediately. According to maritime security experts, Iran possesses naval mines, fast attack craft, and anti-ship missiles capable of threatening commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. Even the perception of danger in that choke point would spike insurance costs, disrupt tanker traffic, and send oil prices sharply higher. Global markets would react within hours. European policy analysts warn that such a disruption would hit economies already strained by inflation, supply chain instability, and geopolitical uncertainty. Asia, heavily dependent on Middle Eastern energy, would feel the impact just as quickly. This is why international observers stress that a regional war involving Iran would not remain regional. The internal situation inside Iran further complicates the calculus. According to human rights monitors, the regime's violent crackdown on protesters has intensified, even as information becomes harder to verify due to internet shutdowns. Political analysts note that regimes under existential threat often escalate externally to justify internal repression. External enemies become tools for domestic control. National security narratives drown out dissent. Emergency measures become permanent. Legal scholars point out that Iran's leadership may calculate the confrontation with the United States serves regime survival better than restraint. A foreign crisis can fracture opposition movements, rally nationalist sentiment, and provide justification for extraordinary security measures. That logic does not require winning a war. It only requires sustaining one long enough to consolidate power. From Washington's perspective, the dilemma is stark. Failure to respond to Iranian threats risks emboldening Tehran and undermining U.S. credibility with allies. Military action, however, risks igniting the very regional war American strategy has sought to avoid for decades. According to former U.S. defense officials, there is no option that guarantees control once missiles start flying. President Trump's public statements reflect that tension. While signaling readiness to act, he has also indicated openness to reassessing based on evolving information. According to analysts, this ambiguity is intentional. It preserves deterrence while leaving room for diplomacy. But ambiguity cuts both ways. Iran may interpret hesitation as weakness, or as preparation. Israeli leaders face their own constraints. Israel cannot tolerate Iranian missile attacks or proxy escalation without responding forcefully. At the same time, Israeli strategists understand that a regional war would stretch defenses and test civilian resilience. Coordination with Washington becomes essential, but coordination also ties Israel's decision-making to American timelines. Gulf states are caught in the middle. According to diplomatic sources, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates fear becoming battlegrounds or retaliation zones regardless of their intentions. American bases on their territory make them targets. Iranian retaliation would not distinguish between hosting and initiating states. This creates intense pressure on Gulf leaders to de-escalate while preparing for worst-case scenarios. Energy ministers across the region are reportedly reviewing contingency plans. Insurance markets are already pricing in elevated risk. Shipping firms are monitoring developments hour by hour. These are not theoretical preparations. They are responses to a crisis that professionals believe could break open with little warning. According to strategic studies experts, the most dangerous assumption right now is that rational actors will always pull back from the brink. Rationality depends on information, time, and trust. All three are in short supply. Iran believes it is surrounded, threatened, and targeted for regime change. The United States believes Iran may be preparing preemptive attacks. Israel believes Iranian missile movements signal imminent danger. Gulf states believe any conflict will devastate them, regardless of intent. Each belief reinforces the next. This is how escalation becomes self-sustaining. According to military historians, once forces are mobilized and authorization thresholds are lowered, leaders lose control faster than they expect. Decisions shift from politicians to commanders. Timelines shrink from days to minutes, and the space for diplomacy disappears. The fragile pause created by Gulf mediation does not resolve these dynamics. It merely delays their collision. Underlying drivers, internal Iranian unrest, unresolved deterrence failures, regional power competition, and domestic political pressures remain intact. Analysts warn that even a small incident could serve as a trigger. A misidentified radar contact, a drone crossing a disputed line, a missile test misread as an attack. In an environment of preemptive authorization, such incidents do not remain isolated. The stakes are now global. Energy markets, alliance credibility, nuclear non-proliferation norms, and regional stability are all tied to what happens next. According to international security experts, the outcome of this crisis will shape Middle Eastern geopolitics for years, if not decades. This is not about whether Iran can defeat the United States militarily. It cannot. This is about whether Iran can impose costs high enough to make intervention politically unsustainable. History suggests asymmetric strategies often succeed at exactly that. As this story continues to unfold, one fact is undeniable. The margin for error is shrinking rapidly. Warnings are no longer abstract. Preparations are no longer hidden. And decisions made in the coming days could determine whether this crisis de-escalates or detonates. The Middle East is not waiting for clarity. It is bracing for impact.